First topic we have is obviously last week's WWE releases. It was very sad to see so many people being released this past Friday or Thursday. It was last week. But anyway, here are the names that were released from WWE. It was Frankie Monet, Ember Moon, Scarlett, Oni Lorcan, Karrion Cross, B-Fab, Jessie Kamea, Zayda Ramir, Trey Baxter, Katrina Cortez, Jeet Rama, Gran Metalik and Lindsay Dorado of Lucha House Party, Keith Lee, Nia Jax, Mia Yim, Harry Smith, and Eva Marie. So, I mean, Finn, before we go into kind of some of the bigger names, what did you think when you actually took a day off from the internet, didn't you? You took
I did.
a well deserved day off, and then you come back and you see the news. What did you think of it, especially after these record profits that they said they've made?
Yeah, it's become almost a part of the routine now, isn't it? I mean, there's been so many releases this year. I mean, how many is it? Like over 70 or something?
I think it's 81. 81 was the number I heard.
81. I mean, it's an incredible amount of people have lost their jobs in WWE this year. I mean, first two, the two that I feel, I mean, it's awful when anyone loses their job. But the two that really stand out on that list of ones of could have been stars were Keith Lee, of course. We've talked about him many times previously on Power Slam podcast and on What's Going Down. I've written about him in Insider Ups magazine as well many times. And Frankie Monet, who had only entered the WWE system, I think it was in February of this year, I think it was.
Yeah, it was not, and she also. I mean, Frankie Monet actually moved from California, where she lived with John Morrison.
Yeah,
They'd lived there for years, and she
yeah.
came to Orlando to kind of make a go of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I understand. I think she was 37 when she entered the WWE system, which you could say is quite old. But I mean, she had a wealth of experience. She was a really big, larger-than-life character, which is something, as we know, WWE goes for, likes to promote, likes to push. There were obviously better women in the WWE system than her in the ring, but I think she very successfully offset any shortcomings she had as a wrestler with her character, with the charisma, with a ability to cut a promo. I thought she did well with the limited minutes and scenarios that she was given by the company in NXT. So I mean, it just feels to me like such a waste. They could have at least given her a shot on the main roster, and they didn't. And it was like NXT. They brought her in with great fanfare. I think it was in April, just after Stand and Deliver, she made a debut, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right.
With many weeks promotion, and she did seem like somebody that was going to receive a big push, potentially have a title reign before she was called up to the main roster. Sadly, that didn't happen. When NXT 2.0 was implemented, she just fell down the rankings, didn't she? She was clearly no longer a priority because NXT 2.0 is mostly about newcomers, younger talents, and she just didn't fit into their plans for her. So I feel really bad for her. I mean, I think she could have done well on the main roster. I think it's a real shame for her that she didn't get that opportunity. And if she feels pretty cut up about it and pretty miffed about it and resentful about it, that would be absolutely understandable, wouldn't it, Kenny? I mean,
Yeah.
it really would. I felt for Jessie Kamea as well, who had been partnered with Frankie Monet. She was obviously a lot younger. I thought she had a lot to offer NXT and WWE eventually. But getting back to Keith Lee, obviously he'd been called up last year, scored a huge win over Randy Orton. As many people have pointed out online, he went toe-to-toe with Roman Reigns in 2019 when we had the Survivor Series NXT invasion, and he had done very well 2 years ago, and it seemed to be, a harbinger of good to come for Keith Lee. It seemed like it was going to be, this was setting him up for a huge run on the main roster. Then nearly a year later, they called him up. He scores that titanic win over Randy Orton, and it looked like he was heading straight to the top. We saw what happened earlier this year. He was taken off TV. I believe it was due for health concerns, but also those problems with creative. They didn't seem to know what to do with him. He kept changing his attire, they changed his music, they changed his name, and he was clearly struggling in their eyes. They didn't really know what to do with him, and he was one of those people that obviously had a lot of talent and had something to offer the company, but they didn't quite know how to present him. But there again, you know, you look at the way he'd been used recently with the squash matches, that did seem like it was going to be a big part of the rehabilitation process. So we could forget about what had happened previously, forget about his disappearances, forget about these changes to his character, his music and his costuming. And this would be a fresh start for him. And after he'd scored these big wins over the likes of Tozawa, he would then be, you know, put on a fast track to the top, the escalator going upward, and sadly he was released. So those are the two or the three that really bothered me in terms of, you know, what have you done? Why have you let these people go? These two or these three people could have been huge assets to this company, and you've release them and they're going to be assets to another company. So what did you think, Kenny? Which ones really bothered you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm keen to also hear from you guys in the comments as well. Who was the most surprising for you guys to see released? I mean, for me, it was Keith Lee. That was the one that I was the most shocked at. I just didn't think that was going to happen. So Keith Lee's probably the most shocking one. I was also shocked by Nia Jax. Not because I particularly think that Nia Jax is going to give us any 5-star classics anytime soon, but I just didn't think they were going to let her go. But I mean, the biggest thing is because they've said it was a budget cut situation, but then, you know, we hear that some of the talent wasn't vaccinated, and that could have been part of the problem. And then there's others who, you know, Frankie Monet, I guess she fits into the older category to WWE, which is a shame because, you know, she should be able to still do it at 37, and plus she's in the system. You know, give it a chance.
I mean, that's it. I mean, what more development did she need in NXT? She could have been brought up to the main roster straight away and would have slotted in perfectly and would have been a contributor to whatever she was asked to do. So it is a huge shame for her that she didn't get that chance after being signed at the age of 37. The odds against that happening were obviously slim, but it happened for her. And, you know, she was so close, she could almost, you know, taste the success, the big time, and it was just snatched from her. So, yeah, very disappointing. I mean, there was obviously Nia Jax. I was surprised to see her go in a sense. But on the flip side to that, she'd been there a long time. She had a bad reputation for injuring people. It did feel like her run was over. Judging by the statement that she put out, the timing of it, I think could be difficult for WWE, or has been difficult for WWE. I think there's a lot of complaints. She'd asked for some time off, and she'd been struggling with anxiety and some other problems. And for a company to axe her when she's going through a rough time, that the optics of that are appalling. Let's face it, aren't they, Kenny? That is not, you know, you expect in 2021 a wrestling company that can very easily afford it to support you in your hour of need. But I mean, there were some other people on the list which I wasn't surprised by. I mean, Karrion Kross, he wasn't going to make it. He wasn't going to. And in some ways, maybe this will be a blessing in disguise for him, because he just seemed like it was start, stop, gimmick change. Just, it almost seemed like, you know, they were raising his hopes only to cruelly dash them. And I think his card was already marked with the audience. I think the audience had already decided that he was a flop. And I think it would have required a Herculean effort on his part and the company's part in order to change that opinion or those sentiments towards him. Possibly if they brought Scarlett in with him, that could have changed the reaction to him. I'm not convinced at this point. I think Kross was pretty much doomed. And I know a lot of people are pointing to the loss to Jeff Hardy as being the beginning of the end for him, and obviously that was not helpful. But to me, Kross was a guy who just was not dynamic in the squared circle. He was not connecting with the audience, and I just don't think he was going to make it. I mean, he was sadly looking more and more like Vladimir Kozlov with each passing appearance. So, I mean, I'm not surprised to see the back of Karrion Kross. And in the long run, it might not be a bad thing for his career, because he simply wasn't going to make it.
Yeah, well, you would even say that when he was Killer Cross at Impact, he was more dynamic. I was looking at the comments here. Most people seem to be the most shocked at Nia and Scarlett actually as well. Scarlett seems to be more shocked at, because it is weird that like with Karrion Kross, I saw Xavier Desmond there saying, are we surprised? We shouldn't be surprised at any WWE releases now because they just release so many people that you've got to imagine. If you're somebody like Johnny Gargano, for example, who's really good, has done so much for the company. Even he probably is on the chopping block now because he doesn't fit the new kind of ethos of what they're doing. But what about Scarlett? Because it feels like if Scarlett had been with Karrion Kross, I mean, it might have ended up a Mark Merrow and Sable situation, but at least in the short term, he would have had something to do, and it might have given him a better chance to get over.
Yeah, agreed. And she was very much in the same category as Frankie Monet, someone who'd done well in Impact, entered the WWE system. I think it was last year she joined. Her and Cross signed at the same time, and I know she'd been paid very poorly by Impact, and this was a big step up in terms of earnings for Cross and particularly for Scarlett when they joined WWE. And she looked to me like somebody who was a can't miss in WWE, and we've just got to. Now we've got to re-examine everything, Kenny, and no one likes to do that. But I mean, Scarlett did look like a can't-miss talent. I mean, go back and watch that match she had with Glenn Gilberti in Impact Wrestling. Or watch it for the first time. Most of you probably didn't see it. I think it was recorded in February of 19 and broadcast early March of 2019. And it was the end of their Battle of the Sexy storyline. And I've put Gilberti's performance over before on podcasts, and it was an amazing heel performance by Glenn. And he totally put Scarlett over, and she did so well in the ring. She showed so much fire. She was dynamic, get up with so much grit and determination and competence as well. I mean, she wasn't, Charlotte Flair or Io Shirai levels of brilliance in the squared circle, but she was definitely an able performer who could do a lot. And with her looks and with her character and charisma and her verbal abilities as well, she was pretty good promo. There was really nothing she couldn't do apart from have a classic matchup. But in the WWE system, there were so many things she could have so many things she could have done, so many things she could have contributed to WWE, so many ways that she could have drawn more viewers to Raw. And my God, it needs to draw some more viewers to that program after this week's ratings. And it just seems like a squandered opportunity. This dazzling piece of talent, and you've just pushed her into the arms of another promotion. So I mean, I'm confused, Kenny, baffled. As I say, now we have to re-examine everything. And none of us like doing that because we like to think we know what's going to happen, and then when something like this happens, it causes us to be unsure of anything, really, doesn't it? It means that any prediction, you're then questioning it. So
do you
really
think
sad?
Do you think in terms of the releases in general, because you mentioned Nia Jax and the depression issues that she had gone through, or even like B-Fab, who had just signed a new contract the week before, feels like but it feels like these releases are not planned. It's not like they're thinking we're going to release this person. It feels like every now and then there's just, we need to knock however much money off of the table, and then they just go through the roster and pick these people. I mean, I'm curious if that's going to... Because remember years ago it used to be that WWE was the dream place to go. That was where you would build to that. Now, I feel like stuff like this is going to have a little bit of an impact on people kind of thinking, well, yeah, I'd like to go there and make money if I can, but, look at all these people who have, just been kind of thrown away at such a high sort of rate. If there's 10 or 20, that happens. It's a business. But 81. But I guess this is this the result of the stockpiling of talent?
Well, it is. It absolutely is. I mean, they'd hired so much talent. I read something online, someone saying, "Oh, WWE is so wasteful getting rid of all this talent," and in a sense, they are. Obviously, particularly the names that we've just mentioned. And there'll be other people that we haven't mentioned who, with investment and development, could have gone on to be stars as well. But I think the accountants in WWE, their way of looking at it is we're being wasteful by having so much talent under contract that we're paying six-figure salaries to, or high five-figure salaries to, and we're doing nothing with them. So that's the mentality. That's what's driven. That's been the thought process behind all these releases. And yeah, they're just going down a list and deciding who's expendable. I mean, the B-Fab one is just absolutely ludicrous. You know, Hit Row had just been brought up as a four-person act. I thought they did well in their first appearance together. I thought the audience liked them. I thought they could have been one of those acts that will get the crowd chanting along with their catchphrases. We don't have too many acts who do that anymore, do we, Kenny? But we used to have loads, and they were just tailor-made for that. B-Fab, I don't think, would have wrestled on television, or had she done so, it would have been very infrequently because she wasn't that good. But she's somebody who I think would have done everything she could to learn and become better. And I think she could have contributed to a gimmick match here and there. And certainly she was a big part of the act and enhanced the act, I felt. And as you say, she just signed a new contract. And then she's axed. And it's, I mean, I just dread to think what she's feeling right now. Maybe hoping upon hope that they might reconsider and bring her back, re-sign her, you know, re-recruit her and bring her back in as part of the act at a later date, which could happen. We have seen that before. That happened, didn't it, with Drake Maverick, if you remember, last year.